The desert looks empty, but it's not harmless. It doesn't chase you, it doesn't warn you, it simply waits. This is the incredible survival story of two young travelers who completely underestimated the deadly silence of the desert. His name was Ethan, he was 20. Her name was Emily, she was 19. They were college students on the adventure of a lifetime, traveling across a remote desert region during their summer break. Imagine it, endless golden sand dunes rolling under a vast open sky. The weather was perfect. Full of excitement, they joined a small off-road tour group to explore the heart of the dunes. The day started with photos, laughter, and a feeling of complete freedom. They felt invincible. But that confidence, that overconfidence, would soon be shattered. In the middle of nowhere, with sand stretching out in every direction, the vehicle lurched and then stopped dead. The engine had failed. The guide, a seasoned local, hopped out to inspect the problem. After a few minutes of tinkering, he sighed. "It's no good," he said, wiping his brow. "Stay right here. I'll walk over that ridge and get help from the next camp. I won't be long." Ethan and Emily watched his figure grow smaller and smaller as he walked toward the shimmering horizon, until he finally disappeared. They waited. At first, they joked around, taking more selfies, not worried at all, but the minutes slowly turned into an hour. Then too, the sun climbed higher and higher in the sky, and the gentle warmth they had enjoyed earlier transformed into an aggressive, oppressive heat. The air inside the car became stifling, and the guide, he never came back. Panic began to creep in. They pulled out their phones, a desperate, almost instinctual reaction. No signal, not a single bar. There was no shade anywhere outside the vehicle, and they had no idea where they were. The vast, beautiful landscape now felt like a prison. Emily's voice was barely a whisper when she asked the question they were both thinking. "Ethan, what if he doesn't return?" Ethan scanned the horizon in every direction. Nothing, just an ocean of sand, waves of heat rising from the ground. It was in that moment that the desert finally spoke to them. Not with a sound, but with a cold, primal fear that gripped their hearts. They were alone, truly alone. The worst decision of their lives was made in the next hour. They started to argue. Should they wait for a rescue that might never come? Or should they try to walk, to find their own way out? The sun was relentless, burning their skin even through their clothes. Their water bottles, which had seemed so full that morning, were already half empty. The thought of staying put, of slowly baking in the heat with their dwindling supplies, felt like a death sentence. So, they made a choice. They decided to walk. They believed they could see the main road in the distance. That single choice, born from fear and desperation, would bring them to the very edge of existence. Walking in the desert is nothing like walking in a park. The heat is a physical weight, pressing down on you, and the desert plays cruel tricks on your mind. The horizon seems to warp and move. The ground shimmers, creating illusions. After just a couple of hours, Emily began to see things that weren't there. Glimmering pools of water that vanished as they got closer. Distant buildings that dissolved into heat haze. Shadows that seemed to dart at the edge of her vision. They were mirages, phantoms created by their dehydrated, exhausted minds. Ethan tried to stay strong, to keep them focused, but his own steps were becoming heavy and slow. His mouth was so dry, it felt like it was full of sand. Every movement drained their precious energy at an alarming rate. Their initial confident pace had slowed to a painful, stumbling shuffle. The sun was their enemy, and it was winning. When the sun, finally, mercifully, fell below the horizon, a different kind of misery began. The scorching heat vanished, replaced by a biting, painful cold. The temperature plummeted. Shivering uncontrollably, they used their bare hands to dig shallow pits in the sand, trying to create some kind of shelter from the relentless wind. They curled up close to each other, their bodies shaking, trying to share what little warmth they had left. They had no food, and their water was now down to the last few mouthfuls. In the darkness, Emily started to cry quietly, her sobs lost in the vast, silent night. Ethan didn't say anything. He just held her, staring up at the sky. The stars were breathtakingly beautiful, a glittering canopy from horizon to horizon. But their beauty felt cold, indifferent, almost cruel. They had never felt so small, so insignificant. This was only their first night. The real nightmare was just beginning. As the first rays of the new sun touched the dunes, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple, the cycle of heat began all over again. Ethan, stiff and cold, pushed himself up. He looked over at Emily. "We have to go," he said, his voice raspy. She stirred, but didn't get up. He gently shook her shoulder. "Emily, come on. We have to move." She tried to push herself onto her hands and knees. She managed to get partway up, her body trembling with the effort. And then, with a soft moan, she collapsed back onto the sand. "Emily," Ethan shook her again, more urgently this time. "Emily, wake up." She didn't respond. Her eyes were closed. She was completely limp. Panic, raw and absolute, tore through him. He shook her harder, his voice cracking. "Emily." He looked around frantically at the endless, empty desert stretching out in every direction. There was no one, nothing. And in the vast, deafening silence of the desert, no one could hear him scream. The desert does not forgive weakness. It doesn't need fangs or claws to be deadly. It just needs time. Emily was alive, but barely. Her body was shutting down from severe dehydration. Her lips were cracked and bleeding, her eyes unfocused, staring into a void that was slowly consuming her. Ethan knelt beside her. He held their last water bottle, its contents barely enough to wet a cloth. Gently, he poured the last precious drops onto her lips. He didn't drink. Not a single drop. In the calculus of survival, some choices are made for you. It's about choosing who needs life more. And in that moment, for Ethan, it was Emily. He knew a fundamental truth about this unforgiving landscape. Walking in the full heat of daylight would be suicide. Their bodies were already at their limit. Any further exertion under that relentless sun would be fatal. So he made the hardest choice a survivor can make. He chose to wait. He positioned himself over Emily, using his own body to create a sliver of shade. The sun beat down on his back, a physical, crushing weight. The heat was a living thing, searing his skin, boiling his blood. Hours crawled by. The pain became a constant companion, a dull, throbbing rhythm that was simply part of his existence. Thirst was no longer just a feeling. It was a physical agony, a fire in his throat that no amount of swallowing could extinguish. As the sun finally began its descent, painting the sky in hues of orange and purple, the oppressive heat began to recede. The air cooled just enough to feel like a gasp of fresh air after being held underwater. Ethan gently shook Emily. She stirred, her eyes fluttering open. He helped her to her feet, her body as limp as a rag doll. They started walking. It wasn't a march, it was a shuffle. One agonizing step, then another. No words were spoken. Every breath, every movement was a calculated expenditure of their rapidly dwindling energy reserves. The world was silent, save for the soft scuff of their shoes on the sand and the ragged sound of their own breathing. Then Ethan saw it. Something that didn't belong in this uniform expanse of nothingness. Tracks. Faint. Almost erased by the wind, but unmistakable. The parallel lines of old tire marks etched into the sand. It was a sign, a whisper of civilization in the heart of desolation. Hope, a feeling he thought had been baked out of him, flickered back to life. It was a fragile flame, but it was enough to ignite his resolve. "Look," he rasped, his voice a dry crackle. Tracks. Emily looked, but the sight didn't seem to register. Her legs gave out, and she crumpled to the ground. She was done. Her body had nothing left to give, but Ethan wasn't done. He couldn't be. He looked at the tracks, then at Emily. There was no choice. He hoisted her onto his back. The weight was immense, a deadening load on his already screaming muscles. Every step was an ordeal. His legs felt like lead, his lungs burned, and his vision swam, blurring the horizon into a wavering line. The desert played tricks on his mind. He saw mirages of shimmering lakes, heard voices on the wind, but he pushed it all away, focusing on one single, primal thought. Stopping meant death. The tracks were their only lifeline. He had to follow them. Just as the last sliver of sun disappeared and the sky bled into a deep, star-filled black, he saw it. A glint of metal in the distance. A dust cloud, small but growing. A vehicle. Adrenaline. A final, desperate surge of it coursed through him. He lowered Emily gently to the sand. He waved his arms, a frantic windmill motion. He screamed, but the sound that came out was a hoarse, broken croak. The effort was too much. His body, pushed far beyond its limits, finally gave out. His vision went black, and he collapsed onto the sand, the world dissolving into darkness. The next sensation was a cool prick in his arm, the gentle hum of an engine, the blessed relief of shade. He blinked, his eyes slowly adjusting. He was in the back of a truck, an IV line feeding life back into his veins. Emily was beside him, also connected to a drip, her breathing slow and steady. A rescuer, a man with a sun-weathered face and kind eyes, offered him a bottle of water. He drank, the cool liquid a miracle on his parched throat. Later, at the rescue camp, the same man spoke to them quietly. "You're lucky. Most people we find out here, they don't make it. They panic. They walk too much during the day, burn themselves out." Emily, her hand now strong enough to grip his, squeezed it tightly. They hadn't panicked. They had waited. They had made impossible choices. They had relied on each other. They had survived not just because they were strong, but because they had stayed human. The desert taught them a final, brutal lesson. It doesn't need to attack you. It doesn't need to hunt you down. All it needs is for you to make a mistake. All it needs is time. Survival out here, and maybe everywhere, comes down to one thing: knowing when to move, and knowing when to stop. Thanks for watching. If you were captivated by this story of survival, make sure to subscribe and hit that notification bell so you don't miss our next video.